This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity.
This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity. This is Synchronicity.
Welcome to episode, what episode is it? 30? I'm going to go with 30. Episode 30 of Synchronicity. I just had a baby 2 days ago. Yesterday? No, it was yesterday. I have no fucking idea what's going on because I've slept 3 hours in the past 72 hours. Also, babies poop black stuff. They didn't tell me that. I don't think they tell anyone that. But when they're born, they poop black stuff for a couple of days. And it's gooey and it's like chocolate sauce. But it's not like chocolate sauce in the important ways. My guest today, episode 30, Synchronicity, doing this. Sah D'Simone. I love Sah. I'm going to shortchange Sah, unfortunately, because my brain is not functioning. Sah is, however, one of the nicest, coolest people I've come across in the past year or so, 2 years. This is another Michael Donovan special. Michael recommended I get in touch with Sah, I think a couple years ago when Sah was going around India, kind of going on this pilgrimage to all of these different places, including Dharamsala, to see the Dalai Lama, all of these he was doing a whole tour, but in a very authentic, cool way. And you'll hear in this episode how cool of a guy he is. He's just incredibly authentic, genuine. There's not a lot of spiritual materialism. There's no spiritual materialism with him. He's doing it. His intention is lined up with his actions. It's really awesome to meet people like him and interact with people with him. Was that a sentence? Did it make sense? It's going to be the worst intro of all time. Sorry. But yeah, this episode's great. Sah also I'm going to direct you to his website where he does a lot of different like holistic coaching type things, but especially for vegan food, like nutrition stuff. He's just got his like incredible degree. He's like a certified. Sah, I'm sorry, I didn't look it up. My brain is just not in the right place today, but he's basically just like a master of food and nutrition and this whole mind, body, soul, connection, and it's really awesome. So he's good. This is the worst intro ever. I don't care. I have a baby. His name is Eli. He's really cool. He's a baby, and he does baby stuff. I'm actually not even back from the hospital yet. I stopped back home at my house to take a shower, and I was like, fuck it. I have to get this podcast out, so I'll record this. So I had to go back to the hospital now. Everything's good. Baby's super healthy. He's adorable, and he's cute, and he's awesome. My lovely wife, Alexis, did an amazing job giving birth to the baby, who is our baby. So yeah, enjoy this episode. Sah's great. Don't let this intro be any indication of how good this episode is. You'll hear how awesome Sah is. So without further ado, here is Sah D'Simone.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Where you're in Florida right now?
Yeah, in Madeira Beach at my parents' place.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm actually in the house I grew up in. We're here probably for another 6 months. I'm having our first child, our son, in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So that's going to be crazy. So we're doing that here, and then probably going to move back to the Hudson Valley area, like a little 2 hours north of the city.
Okay.
Because we miss New York.
I'm actually, I just sent 2 messages to 2 different friends about getting a place upstate New York too.
Cool.
Catskills area. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
That's awesome.
It's just it's like, having lived in New York for so long, like it's still like kind of in our blood and we miss it, but we also appreciate like nature and don't necessarily want to be like smack dab right in the middle of the city. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of, my mom lives in Rhinebeck, about like 2 hours north.
Yeah.
And it's, the Omega Institute is there. It's just like it's like a nice way to get kind of the best of both worlds, so to speak. So that's what it really is.
Yeah. I love the Omega Institute. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
me too. Oh, I totally love it.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, so we'll just get started.
Okay.
Thank you, by the way, for coming on.
Yeah,
I
of
really
course.
appreciate it. I'm excited for this conversation. So typically, I have like a whole list of questions and like I have everything written down, but I purposely didn't want to do it for this one because
Okay.
I am fascinated. I want to hear about your journey, like how you got to where you are now. Because I know
Okay.
you're in the fashion industry. We're connected for the listeners. Michael Donovan was our
Yes.
mutual connection. Who I just spoke to him for an hour today.
Nice.
So I just kind of, let's start there, and I just like I'm really
Okay.
curious and interested to find out more about you. So if you could start,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I moved to New York when I was like 21, and then I started this magazine in my living room. And 6 months later, we had a batch of investment, and then a year later, we had a big investment, and then we moved into the 10,000 square foot office, and we hired 40 people, and the whole thing just took over, and it became a really cool hub because we were doing we were working with these celebrities in a completely different way. We had what we call the bullet consultation, where we would give them a voice, really, and every issue had a more spiritual, I like to call it spiritual, overarching theme. For instance, we had the cosmic issue, we had the sin issue, we had the alchemy issue. So every issue had a theme that people could explore in a more we try to humanize fashion, but also bring this deeper layer of the human experience into a fashion store, which it wasn't there. So we got really lucky, and we got so many doors open, so many people, so many of these big, I guess you'd say A-list people wanted to work with us because of that opportunity that we're giving them.
Right.
And fast forward 3.5 years later, I started to go in a different direction. And two of my best friends were also my business partners. We started to slowly fall apart, where I wanted to continue on that route of doing the cool, the fresh, and the more we started to reach a level of I guess status and within the scene, you needed to continue to work. You needed to bring in more of recognizable names rather than work with the undiscovered British photographer or the guy from New Zealand. We wanted to keep that fresh perspective, fresh new energy all the time. And then I left the magazine with a chunk of money, which was great. And then I came to Florida, and I started to write and blog about about the things that I wanted to do, and travel and experience sustainable living and eat better and meditate and do yoga and all the things that I've intrinsically knew I always wanted to be part of it, but never, because I was so caught up in wearing all black and going to events and
New York,
and you know what I mean? New York's like that.
Yes.
I was so in that matrix that it was so hard for me to take that leap. And the closest thing I did while I was in at the magazine was I would go to Kabbalah every Tuesday. But which was a funny thing too, because the more I established a connection with them there, and the more things started to happen in a positive way for me, the more my personal teacher wanted me to, it sounds really sad in a way, but the more donations they wanted,
Of course, I've heard this. Yes.
which was so disheartening for me, and especially when we got the big investment. He was like, well, so now you have to give this much. And I was like, all right, am I going to Kabbalah because I just want to see Madonna every Tuesday, or am I really here? You know what I mean? I couldn't figure out what was my motive at that point.
Sure.
But I got something amazing out of it. A few things, we can talk about it later. Overall, it was a great experience. And then came to Florida, and like I said, I started writing, and things just started to be great. And again, another idea started to blossom in a really fun way. This website called Oracle Talk, me and my brother started, And within 6 months, we had 4.2 million unique visitors, which was crazy.
Yes, that is crazy.
And then we had Oracle, the big tech company, sue us because we were coming up on the Google search before them. So I was like, you know what? Again, I'm just gonna take their check for getting rid of the, to selling out the name to them, and then I'm just gonna go and go to India, really take on that life that I always looked at the, it sounds really cliche, but I always looked at the hippie life as like, oh, something, I don't think I can do it because it's too much of a cliche. But then you realize that it's really a state of mind, and it's nothing to do with how we've been conditioned to perceive. And so I watched the Krishna Das documentary.
Great documentary. Great documentary.
And I watched the documentary, and then I packed my bags and I went to India. And now fast forward 3 years again, it's going to be 4 years in November since I left the magazine and took on this whole new journey. And went back to India 3 times now, and altogether pretty much lived there in the last year and a half, for a year and a half in the last 3 years. And I miss the fashion industry only from the aspect of self-expression, of, going out, taking on this additional layer to express yourself, which is, I find it really appealing. And also, there's art, and where there's art, there's beauty. When there's beauty, there's light, and where there's light, there's change, and there's potential for love. And and that's where I met Michael Donovan, pretty much.
Of course. Michael's such an interesting guy because he believes so many of the things I think we both believe, but he also firmly places himself right in the epicenter of the fashion world. And I know he's been wrestling with this for years, but he really seems to have a very good perspective on it now. So let's talk about kind of your transition period, and then we'll get to your actual travels in India, which is when we connected. You were actually in India. Were you at Dharamsala at that point? You were somewhere. You were somewhere really cool. But so that's awesome that you found, and you're doing this at a pretty young age, because by virtue of working with a lot of the people I work with, I get the benefit of seeing people at various points in their lives engage with quote unquote spiritual things, not just success, not just money, not just all of these things that people kind of look at. It's like, that's what we need to do. And that's what the culture kind of fosters. You're still relative. How old are you?
29.
Yeah, you're young. You're younger than me. I'm going to be 33 in July. So you had the benefit of kind of going through these experiences at a pretty young age, which is great. You're essentially ahead of the game because you didn't have to accumulate a whole life of experiences, be like, hey, this isn't it. I'm not happy after getting all of these things. But I see it also, the seeds of that were already there because you were trying to bring, whether overtly or not, the spiritual mindset. I mean, you described it being built into Bullet, right? That's why you think people really liked it and engaged. And then you talked about how that kind of got co-opted in some way by the outward manifestations of success. So this is a very, very, very interesting thing to me because I am constantly dealing with this in my professional life. And you'd be surprised how a lot of spiritual organizations, people that surround it, have these same exact problems. They're not insulated from the things that go on in the quote unquote regular business world or the entertainment industry. They're still baked in. So what were some of your observations? Like, you got through this, you obviously got, compensated financially for it, but what was it like going through the actual process of basically realizing, I guess, at some point that you wanted this to be still a spiritual, communicate like a deeper message, and then recognizing that people around you maybe didn't have the same ideology as you? And what was it like working through that, like internally?
It was tough. I mean, you ended up, taking it out on different things: drinking, doing drugs, smoking cigarettes, coffee, eating really poorly. I think we take it out on these external ways, and time goes by and we don't really realize how much damage we've done to ourselves, and in supplementing with a lot of trash, really, and I feel like the worst part for me was like the deep sarcasm that people have with life, and the lack of appreciation and gratitude for for how beautiful and mystical all of this is.
Yes.
Because everyone in that industry has so much money. I mean, very few people, but we somehow managed to be around young people that were either hustlers and were trying their best, or the really wealthy young kids who had all of it from a young age. So they, they didn't have to struggle very much. And, it was, now looking back, all the work I've done the last 3 years has been just like healing all the traumas that have created imprints in my mind. And I think that's what we really come to this lifetime to do. Essentially, one of the big parts is the healing, right? Until we get to the core of who we are, and then we can start to see and blossom into our authentic self, as this really, big word at the moment.
Yes.
And I think it was hard. It was hard, but then I look back and I'm like, oh, it was really fun, but it was such a blur because I was so intoxicated so much of the time. You know what I mean? It's a big blur. I can pinpoint. I can probably tell you a few big moments where we were, working with X, Y, and Z person or doing something, but it was all really related around very vain things that really at this point for me have completely characteristics of the ego that really didn't have we were just totally living in the matrix in the most extent of the way, where we thought that everyone looked beautiful because they were so thin, and we thought everyone was beautiful because they could go to Paris or to London and Milan, and then you realize once you visit these places how much of from that perspective, right? Now going back to these places with the new fresh
it must be
perspective
amazing.
completely changes,
Yes.
But I don't know if I answered your question properly, but that's kind of like.
You did actually answer it properly. I mean, you also spoke about the shift in perspective and how that seems to have had a bigger impact on your life. And then you talked about the healing aspect of this, because I fundamentally believe, I agree with you. We come on here, I believe ultimately we can't recognize this, but it's a conscious decision we make before we come back. And we come back to, as Ram Dass would put it, the sandpaper. The life is the sandpaper that whittles away all the bullshit, and then eventually we can get to be, like you said, the buzzword, our authentic selves. To me, after that, and I see you doing this too, and I want to get to this, is after you really are tuning in to what's actually going on internally and how that affects external reality, then it's usually like, how do I extend this out? How do I start helping other people? That's the natural 1-2 combo of what happens. So talk about, all right, so you sold your stakes in 2 businesses that you helped create. You were trying to inject some level of spirituality in through mainstream media, which I think is such a noble cause, and I think so incredibly awesome. And I'm hoping that type of thinking tends to proliferate over the next few years, because I think it's possible and people are more receptive now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So talk about, so you're at the point where you transition. Then you're going to India, and you're learning, I'm sure, amazing things. When I was speaking to you, I think you had just studied, you were on like a 10-day retreat, and then you did some Buddhist studies. So what did you learn from that experience of being in India for a sizable period of time? Like, what was that like relative to your experience having just worked in the world, very specifically in the West?
Wow, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple times that were really very telling and slightly traumatizing more than healing. One time I was at this meditation retreat in Dharamshala up in the Himalayas at the city where His Holiness Dalai Lama lives, and another one was in Nepal at the home of Lama Zopa Rinpoche in Kathmandu. Both, great masters with huge, important messages. And I think both times what happened, I was able to, all the shit that I've done to myself and to others had been served to me in a silver platter. And I had the opportunity of looking at it and being like, wow, I can either choose to continue carrying on this baggage and all these all this multitude of stuff that keeps dragging me back into old habits and old patterns and old friendships and old environments, or I can drop off this bag here and start to, do the work of cleaning this up, starting with myself and everyone around me. And then it's really amazing how little, it's like how much in autopilot we are, and how much of the conditioning of our parents and everyone around us takes such a toll, and how little time. And then, some scientists talk about that we are on autopilot 96 to 98% of the time. And I realized so much of the fear-based behaviors that I've had that cause pain in other people's and myself had come from the way my mom was raised, and how my dad was raised, and then them moving us into America without speaking the language, and how that created such a fear and guilt and then shame way of approaching life. And you realize that a lot of the stuff, one, it isn't ours, and two, we have the opportunity to change if we take that if we acknowledge that, if we take that step, right, to look at it as I said. And for me, it was like a silver platter. I just saw myself. I saw myself as this, being of light, and then I just saw all these sides of me as these, like, almost like these statues around me, and they were just there. And I was able to once and for all finally not just look at them from the front, but really walk around them, the 360 of each one of those aspects and of these hypnotic behaviors and parts of myself, and be like, wow, I've lived through this. I've experienced all of it, and I've caused so much suffering to myself and people because of all these external factors that weren't really me. And now I feel like the work I've been doing, once I realized that, the deeper layer of the work started to be the scrubbing and the deconditioning and the unlearning and the lifting of the veils, to get to, again, our authentic self that's filled with, creativity and love and compassion,
Yes. That is super well said. I think it's incredibly important to, when you talk about clinging to stuff that isn't ours. And there's a couple ways to look at that. One is, neuroscience is even proving that there is no real us like we like to think about it. We have developed these systems around us that are all these complex layers of webs and things that we put around us to say, oh, well, this is Sah, this is Noah, this is whoever, this is X, this is me. And that isn't even as real as we think. But that's absolute reality. Let's talk about relative reality, where we do have to walk around and think of ourselves as something most of the time, because you need to. This is how you function in the world. I've noticed this, and I think people who get very clear at some point, not that I'm very clear, but this is something I've always had kind of intuitively built into me. If you ever walk into a room and you really pay attention to what's going on to a room with a lot of people, like a party, and you pay attention to what's going on with yourself internally, when you walk into that room, you can actually perceive a lot of different energies, not even speaking to people, anything, and those have an impact. So this is why what you're describing about getting straight and looking and doing the 360s around your statues is so important, because if you don't know what's really you're bringing to the table and can't kind of draw that boundary between what is me and what's not me, it's very hard to operate in kind of a wise and skillful means. What do you think it was in India that allowed you to see so clearly, as you put it on a silver platter, those aspects of yourself? Was it the practice you were doing? Was it just kind of a right timing type event? Like, how did that come about?
Great question. I think learning to sit with myself. Like a lot of people, now that I've taken on that role of creating, guiding people on this journey a little bit. It's really telling how hard it is for us to just like close our eyes and stuff, and we can't really put in the time to, just acknowledge all the shit, excuse my language,
No.
all the crap that, all of the thoughts that are, that comes up into our mind. It's like so terrifying. And I think Eckhart Tolle talks about like it's 190,000 thoughts a day, and 95% of that is trash. And the more you sit with yourself, the more you acknowledge that it's all so real. And I think for me was one, sitting, a lot. We were meditating for 8 to 12 hours a day, and then when we got and that was only for 10 days. And then when I did Kopan, that was a month long, and it was 4 hours of lecture, and then I think was 6 hours of meditation. And some were guided, and some were just just do you've learned the practice, just do your stuff now. And of course, the more you're ushered to that space where none of this reality makes a lot of sense, and then you're so curious about the other aspect of reality, that you're at that pinnacle of mystery, right? Of where it's all love and beautiful and light, and what we talk about, all those spiritual woo-woo stuff. We walk up to that little part, right? We're ushered there by meditating long hours. You want more of that. And in India, you're so, the more authentic you are about your purpose in India, the more the right people would just come up to you. And, I had this amazing opportunity in Vrindavan. I was at the ISKCON temple, the Hare Krishna temple, and I was living there, and I only planned on staying in Vrindavan for a week, because I was like, okay, it's Kartik month, right? Where it's 24 hours of chanting for an entire month, and it's the holiest days for the Hare Krishna people happen during the months of November. I was like, this is great. Auspiciously, one thing happened that led me there.
Sure. And,
I was, there, and one thing led to another. Ended up meeting this amazing teacher who, again, it just proves that the more authentic we are, the more we become like these magnets for more beautiful and telling and I think if our curiosity is authentic, I think the right tools would just really come to us.
Yes, that is a key principle that I found in my life. I think it's the basic principle of like attracts like. And also, again, being able to make the decisions about what you want to do. Like you pointed out, so many of us, myself included, are guided by things that aren't even showing up on our radar, right? Carl Jung, one of my favorite thinkers, one of his famous quotes is, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, you'll look at it and it'll direct you, and you'll call it fate," right? And you'll just say, "Oh, well, these things are happening to me. I don't know why," whether it's karmically, whatever it is. So really, meditation is a wonderful way, because when you're being still, it doesn't mean, I think this is a huge misconception with meditation, is people think when you meditate, you're going to be serene and calm and nothing is going to come up and your mind's going to be empty. And maybe that happens at some point, or for little bursts, or if you're doing it for decades, maybe for a little longer, but it's really just getting comfortable with the things that are floating past your mind and not latching on to them. So I don't find it surprising after your spiritual journeys in India, which I'm sure wasn't all hunky-dory all the time. It's a from everyone I know who's gone there, that's a crazy place. It's a very intense place, especially depending on where you are. But I feel like you definitely got the lessons that you were supposed to get there, and I'm sure you feel like that too. So talk about coming back and some of the stuff you're doing now, because I see you on Instagram and I see you on Facebook and I love it. You're a hardcore vegan. And I was vegan for 2.5 years, primarily at first for health reasons, and then it just became very clear for ethical and spiritual reasons. It was great. But then I'm not a vegan anymore. And I went back, and it's very cool.
What happened?
What happened this is actually what happened. So my wife and I went on our fancy honeymoon to Turks and Caicos, which is not a trip I would typically take. And while there was vegan cuisine, it was, the type of vegan cuisine where they're not really putting in as much effort as they are to the regular stuff. So I fell off the wagon there, and I had a hamburger for the first time in 2 years, and all of my pleasure senses started getting activated again. And I realized my initial approach to veganism had been not the right way to do it. I was I was bringing all of my bullshit along with veganism, and I was, I was talking about it all the time, putting in people's faces, because I wasn't comfortable with how I had been and what I was doing. I still eat vegan, regularly. Like there are days where I won't eat meat or cheese very much. We get a food delivery service, Purple Carrot, which I love, which is, teaches you skills to make vegan
Yeah.
stuff. But I don't know, it's there's this oscillation that I think happens with a lot of people, myself included, where I go through these kind of waves of being very engaged in some type of practice, and then something happens and it kind of knocks me back into regular reality. And I think that is somewhat built on who I am as a person, but also the work that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to normalize a lot of this stuff, as I'm sure you are. We don't want this stuff to seem esoteric and woo-woo to people. We want veganism. As I was vegan, it's super easy to do. It's actually more delicious. You feel better. It's great for the planet, and it's just obviously a better way to be doing relative to what we're doing as a culture. Intellectually knowing that and implementing it on a regular basis is something that I struggle with, and that's what happened. I fell off the wagon. So could you just talk about, for you, the relationship that you've noticed between mind, body, and especially veganism? I'd love to hear about that. You're going to inspire me to do it again.
I think what happens for a lot of us, and at the beginning for me, it's what you said. It's this like cognitive dissonance where we believe we have to be vegan, but when we see all these beautiful, quote unquote, conditioned mind to look at a cheeseburger and think it's beautiful and delicious, or there's that space, that gap where, as you're saying, Carl Jung, it's the merger of the subconscious and consciousness, and finding that glimpse in there. I think for me, it started with I started to get these like drop downloads in my meditation that I needed to quit smoking, quit drinking, quit eating meat, so I can like start to go to the next level and the next level and the next level. And I quit certain aspects, but started back with certain aspects. Sure. And I think what happened is I think what happened to me was I just started to feel so good, so good and so clear. And the more I talked about it with people that had been doing it for a while, and I was recently living in Bali, and I met a breatharian, and she had been drinking cucumber juice for 2 years. She would eat occasionally, but it was very rare. And there's another guy, Victor Rose or something, who also does transitioning for people that want to live more plant-based. And then, and also the deeper you get, the more clear you start to feel. Yes. The less you want to engage in this harmony with earth and with, everything that goes into our body. And I think we're able to purify so much of our spiritual body by cleansing of our internal organs. And that was a big part for me. Is, this might sound totally crazy, but sometimes you take a shit and you feel like you cleanse your soul. It's like you've heard this. People say this. Oh my God! There is a I guess we could say this, an esoteric meaning to that process of cleansing of the body, and then the more you read, the more you realize that a lot of the mystics,
it's pretty obvious.
A lot of the mystics, started with eating meat, and then they went to the forest, and then they were eating fruits and veggies, and they were eating herbs, and then they were drinking water, and then they were doing nothing, and then they became realized. And I'm not to say that I'm close to any of that stuff. Maybe this lifetime I'll be able to help just enough people that I can, purify some of my karma, that I might come back as a human next time, right. Or not. But I think it makes a lot of sense. You feel lighter, and the lighter you feel, the more you have lighter energy to put out, and then I think it's such an amazing tool to create harmony with earth and yourself, and you start to have more energy, and the basic stuff that people talk about, more energy and more. And for me, it was the biggest thing. Who I have struggled with depression and OCD, HAD, anxiety, all the chronic mental illnesses I've struggled with before. And my mom too, and then her mom committed suicide. So that's running in my emotional DNA, and I feel like within my 23 little ringlets in there, half of it's very traumatic based, anxious based imprints that I found that by eating cleaner, it was a way for me to continue that detoxing, continue to heal, continue to clean, and now I'm inspired to bring people into that journey. And I'm coaching a couple of clients at the moment about who are heavy meat eaters, and
Yes.
I always recommend this book by Mark Bittman. He's a New York Times writer.
Yes, of course.
Vegan Before 6.
So Mark Bittman is actually one of the founders of the Purple Carrot, which is my food delivery service that I use.
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah, Mark Bittman's the man. He's totally awesome. Yeah.
And I just got this text message from my client today, and I was just like, wow. She's like, I just ordered Vegan Before 6. I was, I'm so inspired to change. And she's been eating vegan into 6 for the last week. And she's like, Sah, I'm already feeling lighter, I'm already feeling cleaner. Like she's giving more emphasis to the dinner plate, when she's having a piece of animal protein, and we started to take things for more appreciation for that moment. And I think it's what's lacking for me was growing up in Brazil with meat 3 times a day. You don't think about it once. Where did that come from? None of it. You just you expect the rice, the beans, and the beef. You expect that. So I'm struggling with it a little bit now because my mom is, I would say 90% vegan, and my dad is still asking for, we're having barbecue at the house on Saturday, and he's asking me if I can cook meat. And I was like, Dad, we're going to talk about it.
And that was also, I was going to say, a big component, and it influenced my behavior is, you're talking about growing up eating meat 3 times a day. There's a nostalgia that we attach to eating very much. Like it's a pleasurable thing we do. And that's why some people get so angry with vegans, or if say you shouldn't be eating meat for this reason, that, even if it logically makes sense, they're like, you're attacking who I am. I'm a meat eater. This is what I do. And to further elucidate the points you're making about meat, I'm of the belief that whatever you get, I'm a big believer in this. So whether it's meat, whether it's marijuana, whether it's anything, the karmic influence of everything that has started from the beginning of that, including the people who brought it to you, has an imprint that resonates. So when you're talking about that trauma that you experienced that's in your emotional DNA, when you take something from an animal who was slaughtered in a way that was filled with fear and terror, and that eventually gets to your plate, maybe from people who didn't like preparing it. This is why fast food can be such a bad thing. But when it gets to you, that resonates with all that fear-based stuff internally. And I think
completely.
So I think that's why you also see, when you read the mystics, you don't see a ton of people advocating for the eating of meat. I do know that there is Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism. They do eat meat, but I think it's for a different reason than we all eat meat. And Native Americans, obviously, they were very respectful of this cycle of life, and that is a different way of eating meat. And I think if you choose and are consciously aware of it, that's okay. I've said this many times, like, if we had to kill everything that we eat, I think people would be eating a lot less meat. Most people probably wouldn't want to slaughter a pig or a cow or a chicken just to have that sensation of eating it. It's a traumatic experience. The Tibetans, though, based on where they are geographically, at least when they were there primarily, you didn't have a lot of options. You kind of had to, and that's a different thing than just being like, hey, I just got this burger from this place, or I just got it from the store. So this battle of conditioning and culture versus kind of authentically knowing logically and rationally that maybe this isn't the best either for us, for the animals certainly, and also for the planet. I mean, talk about, environmentalists. This is a huge thing, and most environmentalists who are not vegans don't want to hear it, but as great as it is reducing carbon emissions, the biggest carbon emissions come from factory farming. It comes from this huge perpetration of you can hear my old veganness coming out, but it's so true. It's so true what you're saying. So could you talk a little bit about how you're trying to get this out? Because I see the way you're doing it, you're not a pushy vegan. You're just highlighting really amazing looking stuff, giving basic recipes, and I'm like, oh my God, that looks amazing. Like, this makes me want to actually go make this stuff. So can you talk about your approach now with veganism and how you're navigating those waters?
Sure. So I signed up to become a health coach a year ago, which I'm actually graduating this week, which is
Oh,
really
cool.
exciting.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks. So we studied over 100 different diets there, and the more you started to realize that it's it is how you wanted to go about life, and it is about the imprints you want to create in your mind stream and yada yada, all the stuff that we talked about it. But I think essentially my message is to get people to eat 70% of a plant-based diet, and whatever way they can, because the better they feel. And this is what something that we were taught in school, and something that we also know is intrinsically we all know this, which is the beauty of it. The better you feel about yourself, the less you're going to want to create this harmony with everyone else. So you're not going to, and the more in tune with your feelings you'll be, so the more you're going to be tapped into your heart, into the electromagnetic field of the heart that, all the scientific research is now matching up that 5,000 times more powerful than the brain. So your intellect is not as smart as you thought it was,
Sure.
So it's all this amazing stuff that really gets me to want to continue on this path, and just to getting people to eat, simpler. And I think ideally the message is to eat whole foods and look at your plate and know I'm eating X, Y, and Z. I know exactly what's each one of these elements. I know exactly how they all came about here, and I know how it's seasoned. And try to eat the least amount of packaged foods and the least amount. And when you look at something that's packaged, try to see if there's 5 or more ingredients. That's a rule that I tell my clients. If there's more than 5 ingredients, you probably shouldn't be eating that. And also all the chemicals that we can't even pronounce.
Right.
That's the crazy part.
We can all
And
pronounce tomato.
Exactly. And potatoes and kale and spinach
Yeah.
and arugula and dandelion, yada yada. And
Yeah.
something that I read recently that shocked me is apparently 92% of the time you eat anything, your body goes into a shock, like, oh my God, what is this? And immediately thinks it's something bad. And then it starts to work itself back. Although you might have the avocado toast every day, and every time you have it, the body shocks itself. It gives itself a mini heart attack, and then it starts to work itself back to like, oh, it's actually good and nutritious, and then back and back and back. So imagine if you have, certain things that you have 20 to 30, sometimes 40 ingredients on some packaged food, or there's a million things we can look at that has so many ingredients. Even peanut butter.
Yes.
You can go and get that. There's got 20 ingredients in it. Imagine how the body reacts with every single one of those ingredients. So my whole message with what I'm doing is simply simple is better. And that's what goes with everything,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's just what it is. And the cleaner we eat, the better you feel. And it's not something you just need to read it, but it's an experiential practice. And the more you and get people to cook too. How crazy is it that we go to school, and we don't even learn how to take care of our bodies, how to nourish our mind, and how to eat. It's like the basic things that get people all, excuse my language, but all fucked up these days.
Yeah.
We don't know how to take care of our anxiety, or how the mind works, or how the body works, or how to eat. Like the basic human needs to like live and coexist.
Yes, it's true, man. And I think that is a product, ultimately of the culture and society that has just, been dominant for probably a couple thousand years at this point, which is this growth at all costs, at all expense. And it puts us out of tune with what the way of life. And when we get those, for some of us, brief glimpses of what it's really like, most of us don't have the skills or tools to kind of examine it and then go back to that place and then live from that place. So could you tell me, like, so you obviously, because going back to Bullet, you had this in you and you were able to at least express it in some way. And when I say this, I mean this desire to help yourself and clearly help other people and live more authentically. Where do you think that came from? And then follow up to that is, what specifically, like teachers wise or paths have you looked at and said that's been really helpful for me? This is something that has helped inform my decisions.
You mean like in terms when I was at Bullet, how was I expressing?
No.
No.
I look at it as the common thread between you had this in you when you were working at Bullet, even though you weren't, advocating a vegan lifestyle and you weren't traveling and doing meditation and all these spiritual pursuits. You had that seed in you, and when the conditions ripened and you put yourself in position, they started to flower like it does for most people. But you must recognize. I mean, you worked with these people. I've worked with these people. I still work with people like this, and I come across them. There are people who what we're saying to means nothing. Like this does not make sense. It sounds like a lot of navel gazing and totally made up stuff. But you obviously had it in you. Like when I examine for myself, like it baffles me that I picked up the books that I did at the age that I did. I don't have an actual explanation for that, but I can tell you, well, I picked up these books and they made a lot of sense to me. And then the next thing led to this, and it led to this, led to this. So anything that kind of would illuminate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I was playing with the Ouija board at like
Cool.
10 years old, and really thought myself as some kind of like I always wanted to have superpowers, and so I was always
X-Men and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like X-Men for me was like something that I knew
Me too.
deep inside of me that it existed somewhere.
Me too.
So
cool.
So that layer of me it's still so alive, and it became more alive once you go to India and you experience some really crazy things that you can't really talk about it with a lot of people because they're like, all right, you're on some next level. You're like, what are you on? Let me get some of that, because but I think so it started with that, and then I always felt like such interesting energy when I would be in church. Not that I related to what they're saying, because I felt like it was just too like institutionalized in a way that it felt like I needed to, it didn't give me like a sense of freedom that I was looking for. It tapped into my, our most necessary, our most powerful need. I felt like belonging to something was good. And then I think it was moving to America. I started reading Aleister Crowley, and dabbling into that sort of the occult, and then that led me to study his teachers. And then these were people in Africa, and then those people in Africa were people that the mother, Sri Aurobindo.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, the mother was studying with them in Africa too, and then when she went to India started to build Auroville, she realized that these guys were quote unquote the occult, studying dark magic. We're talking about the same things that the Hindus were talking about, and one thing just sort of led to another, and I can't even tell you how I came across Ram Dass, but I think it was through Krishna Das documentary, and I think it all sort of like started for me with the Maha Mantra, like hearing that a few times, that something inside of me said, oh, you've heard this before. Exactly. This is something that's part of you. And in terms of books, I'm reading The Seeker's Guide right now, which is by Elizabeth Lesser, the founder of the Omega Institute. I'm actually going to be teaching there this summer, which I'm so excited.
Really? When?
Yeah, August, September.
Oh, cool. Well,
yeah.
If I'm up there, because we're planning on making a trip to upstate New York, if I'm up there, I would love to come by. I love Omega. It's one of my favorite places.
I would love for you to come.
Yes,
it's going to be on Saturdays. So there's 6 Saturdays that starting mid-August through mid-September, and it's going to be called the Happiness Equation, where it's a lot of science. So you get the ego to be calm and understand that there is rational understanding, like chill the fuck out. This is real. What the mystics have been talking about for thousands of years. Now you actually have the vocabulary to understand it.
Yes.
And then a lot of nutrition, obviously, and then all the spiritual practices that have helped me relieve anxiety and depression and OCD and all that stuff. So it's a mixture. It's a 3-hour class for 6 weeks where we talk about all this stuff. But to go back to your point, I think I think it started with Aleister Crowley and then wanting to be a witch or a wizard, whatever you call it, a Wiccan, and connecting to that sort of magic, and then working myself back into the light, and I think India and studying with the mystics there, and finding yourself walking up different paths, and I think honestly my practice right now is very rooted in Tibetan Buddhism. And
I'm so happy you said. I have.
Yeah.
This is this podcast is called Synchronicity. I just had a conversation with the Vajrayana Buddhist Lama Tsomo, who just wrote a book, Why the Dalai Lama is Always Smiling. And before I actually started working with Love Serve Remember, I have right in front of me. It's my Tibetan singing bowl.
Yes.
It's nuts. There's something about Padmasambhava, and I get the chills whenever I speak about it. There's something about that Tibetan path that resonates so strongly. It's like the wisdom, whatever it is. It's something that I know intuitively has guided this path. I'm sure there's something to do with past lives and God knows what. But I love that you said Tibetan Buddhism, because I've found that this is slowly underpinning so many of my interactions, especially on this level. So that's awesome to hear you say that.
Yeah. I mean, His Holiness Dalai Lama, the first time I saw him, I just knew he was the man with all the answers for me. It was just like, okay, you just, and I think what Buddhism, they say from living with the Hare Krishnas that Buddha came at a time when the Hindus needed the least amount of dogmatic information, and then when Buddhism was gone from India, Padmasambhava came to bring it to Tibet, where there's all the killing happening. So it feels like it keeps coming at the times when we need the most, when we need to like strip away all the dogmatic, and it's I mean, it's changed my life, really, so awesome. To say the very least,
Yes, mine too. I couldn't agree more. And just some of my favorite wisdom teachers, Chogyam Trungpa, have just come from, Pema Chodron, have come from this lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, which is, I will say this, I very rarely advocate that on the podcast, anyone listening to it, but this Lama Tsomo episode, you're going to love.
Okay.
She had one of the clearest.
I'm writing it down.
Tsomo, Tsomo. She had one of the clearest and most direct explanations of Buddhism, Vajrayana, and just more importantly, how to practically apply this to our lives. It was revelatory. Wow. Awesome. Yeah, you're going to love it. Okay, so we're at the end here. We're going to do this again because I have a feeling our paths will weave in and out very often. Cool. But I would love for you, I leave most of these podcasts asking my guests for a practical tip or tips that have helped them specifically on their path. I know we've spoken about many of those things already, but one that you're like, this really helped me. And it can be simple, it can be complex, however you want to approach it.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, no, this is what I share with everyone. Cleanse your internal organs so that way you can have a clear mind. And once you have a clear mind, you can drop into the heart. So that little, motion is what's helped me so much.
That's really important too, because I think there's a tendency, especially with a lot of the new age stuff, is people just want to do positive heart-based work all the time. But if you're not coming at it from a clear place, you can get what Chogyam Trungpa refers to as idiot compassion. Not using compassion in the real way you're supposed to use it, not to the detriment of yourself and other people. So that huge little switch there, and that's so very important. Sah, this has been awesome.
Cool.
I really
Thank you.
Had a great time,
Thank you so much, Noah.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure. And I hope to see you again.
Yes, man. Thanks. All right,
okay, cool.
Great episode, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm still, I'm recording this, after the baby. My brain is still discombobulated, but I very much enjoyed talking to Sah. Really great guy, as you can see. I'm going to direct you to his website, sahdsimone.com. Links to this on syncpodcast.com. Book giveaway this week. What am I giving away this week? I got to pick something to give away. Let's go with Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. How about that? By Chogyam Trungpa. Another Chogyam Trungpa book. One of my favorites. Going to give that away. So if you want to be entered in the giveaway contest, all you do is go to Sync Podcast. That's SYNC podcast.com. Great job for me. Still spelling that correctly. Go there, join the community. There's a little pop-up thingy. And there's also something on the right side. Join the community, automatically entered. Super easy. That's it. I'll see you next week. I have episodes recorded, so episodes will still come out regularly, even though my brain is not working. So thank you. I'll see you next week.